Welcome to the Gastro Girl podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Gaulin.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Gastro Girl podcast. I'm your host, Jacqueline Gaulin, and we're so excited about our episode today. We're going to be talking with my dear friend, former colleague, and the amazing best-selling author and expert in kindness, Dr. Tara Cousineau. Tara, so happy to have you on the show again.
Oh, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
I was really looking forward to this episode because we're going to talk today about her latest book, The Perfectionist Dilemma. And we're going to explore, how the relationship of being a perfectionist ties into gut health, because we all are aware of the gut-brain connection. And I was so fascinated. And I'll admit I haven't finished the whole book. I got it a couple of weeks ago, but it's an amazing accomplishment. And it's all about learning the art of self-compassion and to be a happy achiever. And I know personally I struggle with perfectionism. And I'm sure our listeners do too. Have you ever felt like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, or that nothing you do is ever good enough? Well, you're not alone. And Dr. Tara is here to, explain the main points of her new book, and also to kind of give us some guidance on how we can manage and control our desire to be such a perfectionist. And just before we jump in to invite Dr. Tara to speak and answer some questions, I just want to share a little bit about my personal journey and how this relates to perfectionism. And Tara, you know this really well because you were around the early days of when Gastro Girl was a blog. Remember those days?
Yes.
And, you're a founder too. You've dabbled in entrepreneurship. We've worked on several startups together. And I've always felt this enormous responsibility to get it all right. Not just for myself, but for my audience, my team, and for the people that we're trying to help, the patients we're trying to serve. And this pressure is to be perfect, whatever in our heads we define it as, kind of leaves me out of balance sometimes. I've neglected my own health journey. I used to be a amazing exerciser every day in the gym at 5:30, and I've kind of slacked over the last couple years, which makes me spiral into feeling guilty and I'm not doing enough. And if I don't do 10 miles a day, I've failed, or so that I don't do anything. So it's this vicious circle of never feeling enough. And I've skipped meals. I've worked late. My poor dogs are looking at me like, when are we going to go play? And I set these impossible standards for myself, as I'm sure many of us do. And I'm still learning how to quiet that inner critic. And Tara, you've always been a voice of reason, even in our friendship, kind of helping, to be like, you have all these pieces. You just need to take a step back and kind of take a breath. And that's why you're here today. So again, welcome. I really want to dive into this.
I'm really happy to be here. I mean, I have to say to the listeners, I am just really impressed and amazed at Jackie's transformation from writing that blog many years ago into what it's turned into. And I do have to say that, persistence and passion and sticking to things is, part of sort of just, I always say life is maintenance. Like you just have to kind of do it, you got to do the reps. And then
I'm always humbling when we look at experts like yourself and you share your personal journeys about writing books and being a mom of two growing young women and a wife and a daughter and all those things. Like, before we get into the book, share a little bit about you and what our listeners to know about you and
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I want to say that this drive to succeed, the pressure that we feel, you're not alone. Like none of us are alone. I mean, there's just forces from every angle, social, cultural, familial, our own desires, our own dreams that we had as kids. And it's really hard not to kind of fall into that camp of never good enough. It just kind of manifests for people in different ways. But, my journey started probably from the day I was born. My mother is German. She is very efficient and organized. I grew up having to have everything nice and neat. I say I have like an inner neatnik. And when I get anxious, I start cleaning. Like, that's my default. Is like, when I can't stop doing something, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's bothering me? Like something's going on that I fall into this pattern. And also, I think our backgrounds really influence some of our habits and our behaviors. And I was a super anxious kid growing up, and my parents got divorced. It was a chaotic household. And I just had this like one sort of message in my mind is like, you just got to get to college. Like, I was 10 years old. I'm like, I got to figure out the next 12 years of my life. I just got to get to college. And that is really when I think sort of this achiever kind of really was born. I just thought it was a ticket out. And then in some ways it became almost compulsive. Just like you said that with running, that you'd get up at 5:30 in the morning, you would do it every day. And it became sort of like, it's kind of when a happy habit turns into a harmful habit, after a while, you're going to get injured or you're going to burn out or something's going to happen. So I feel like, the perfectionism mantle kind of is a little bit epigenetic. It kind of comes from my background, certainly genes. And then there's just the pressure to be a human being in this day and age. And it's like the goalposts keep moving farther and farther out.
Yeah, we share a lot. We've been on women's workshops together over the years, and we've been called soul sisters because when you say you couldn't wait to get to college, that's all I cared about too. I was in a house with 5 kids, the oldest, very chaotic, very stressful, anxious. I would go in the basement with my winter coat on because it wasn't a heated basement, and do my homework just to have my little space by myself. But I couldn't wait to get out of high school and into college. But it was always that achieve. And then as you get into an adult, it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always equate hard work to what you want, right? Because when I like a kid like us, we would win essay contest. We know we could do it, or win a race. But as adulthood, like when I started the startup, okay, I did this great startup, and now I'm going to raise all this money. Well, that's not how it happened. It's not how it happened.
I know. But you know what you said about sort of being the teenager in the basement, focusing on schoolwork. I mean, that was a really adaptive, protective function, right, at the time. So was mine. I was like, okay, I'll just be an A student. And education just didn't come easy to me, and I feel like I overworked it a little bit because that was my armor, right? So perfectionism, in many ways, is an armor. You're striving and you're figuring out your particular path. It's different for everybody, but that becomes your armor. And at some point, that armor is just too heavy. It's not protecting you anymore. In fact, it's weighing you down. And I always say, and I think it's relevant to what you're doing, is that, and when you're on that sort of treadmill, right? And that's the metaphor. It's just like this treadmill. You might not even be aware that you're on the treadmill until your body speaks. Like at some point, the body's going to say, whoa, this is too much. I can't take it anymore. And something will happen. Something physical will happen, or emotional or mental. So we have to pay attention to our bodies. But I think for those of us who tend to be in the overachieving camp, people pleasing, perfecting, performing, producing, like you just can't stop. At some point, your body will stop you.
That's a great point, and it's a great segue to why we're so excited to have you on this episode today. Is an area clinical psychologist. You have amazing years of experience. You've worked with all types of people, but I wanted to specifically to talk about some of those physical symptoms and even psychological symptoms of stress and perfectionism on the body. And a lot of this is in that gut-brain axis, and that could lead to issues like IBS, poor digestion, chronic fatigue, and other symptoms when we're in a constant fight or flight mode and our gut can't function the way it used to. Personally, my history, I had traumatic. When you met me, I was going through a very painful life experience. And that's when I was diagnosed with IBS. The stress was so much. No matter what I did, I just kept losing weight. And, you go through all the tests, and it all comes down to it's stress related in that intersection of gut brain interaction. So talk a little bit about those signs and symptoms.
Yeah. Well, first, I have my own definition of perfectionism that sort of, just evolved over the years. And basically that perfectionism is this paradox created by this need for belonging and or the fear of rejection. And it's paired with unrealistic expectations for achievement and approval that drain your life force. And I think that's the component that I add to the perfectionism picture here is that it really drains you of your energy. And, if you want to talk metaphysical, like your life force. Now, I work with high achievers. I work part-time at Harvard University's Counseling Center. I mean, if you're not a perfectionist, what are you there? And, it's like the extreme on one hand, but I work with people in my private practice across the board. And it's so interesting when I start asking people, well, how do you feel? And they'll give an answer about what they think. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Could you bring it down to the body? How do you feel? How do you notice this stress or this tension in your body? Now, some people will rattle off, that they might have they might have IBS or migraines. It's pretty common, actually. Talk about the gut brain. It's like, oh, migraines, IBS, yeah, okay. What's your body trying to tell you or communicate to you? How did it get to this point? What's sort of coming up along the way? But then I actually start with a tutorial on the nervous system. So even in my book, in the first section, I talk about the nervous system, the parasympathetic, the sympathetic, the enteric nervous system, and that it becomes very out of balance, in part because we're so disconnected from it. And when we can understand that, we're in chronic fight or flight, and it's actually calling on energy of the body, like, it's going to spew out stress cortisol because it needs that for energy. That's what cortisol is, right? It's a glucose. It's, your body's saying, wait a minute, I need more energy. And that, as you know, and as you teach, ends up in inflammation. And inflammation shows up in different ways for different people. For you, it showed up as a gut health issue. For me, it showed up as literally trigeminal neuralgia. Like I was clenching my jaw so much that I was affecting, I thought I was having a stroke, and so, like, what is going on? I've got this tingling sensation in my face. And the doctors, I ruled out all the neuro stuff, just like you probably got ruled out on certain things. Yeah. And then they're like, yeah, you just got to chill out. And you're like, what? Really? You really want to kind of hold yourself back from swearing at them like this is more than just stress. But it's just that it's manifested now in a new way. And I always say, those are the signs, those are the cues. Let's start there instead of the story, because we can get caught up a lot in their story. Well, I had a hard childhood. I had a really terrible life event. Okay. And now in your present day life, how is this affecting you? Because I think what people do is they get stuck in the story and not necessarily, well, what's happening in present moment in their body? Are they connected to it? Are they aware? Sometimes people get hyper aware. They have a hypersensitivity to the cues in their body. They don't recognize like, oh, right, my heart's supposed to race when I'm feeling nervous. That's normal.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you mentioned that, And we do get caught up in the story, I think, because we're looking for a reason. And that could root back to perfectionism because we always want to find, what is the cause and effect. And we want to figure things out so that we can move on. But the story, you're right, it's the story. And I've leaned on the story. Oh, this is why I am the way I am. But that's why, recognizing it. And we may not really realize, I didn't realize until we started talking about your book, like, oh, am I really a perfectionist? Because I wouldn't classify myself as a perfectionist, but I guess I am because I want things to be the way I want them.
Well, it's interesting, when we look to the research literature on perfectionism, the people who research this stuff and categorize people, they'll say, they've defined perfectionism as sort of having, there's like three elements, three categories, let's say. So there's socially prescribed perfectionism. That's the the thinking like, I'm never good enough compared to this person. It's the compare and despair flavor of perfectionism. You're constantly looking to what other people are doing. Are you with them? Are you behind? Are you a late bloomer? As I heard from a client this morning. And instead of seeing that as a positive, she saw that as a negative. So there's that social comparison piece of it. Then there's the other oriented perfectionism where you're expecting perfectionism for other people. So that might be the classic person who's, the mean boss, let's say, because that person's expecting that everything around them needs to be at this super high standard that's usually unrealistic.
Right.
And then there's sort of the self-oriented perfectionism where I think you and I might fall in just even generationally because we didn't have social media back when we were growing up. So
thank goodness. Oh my God. If that was a component then, I don't think I could have handled it.
I know. I've been in the hospital somewhere. But that's that sort of like that inner drive, I need to get educated,
Yes.
very purpose, oriented, and you're raising the bar for yourself. It's not from the outside,
Yes.
I mean, obviously there's flavors and you can overlap on all of these, but I try to loosen up that whole sort of the research definition because that's helpful in terms of, well, what does this correlate to? And it does turn out that there is a high correlation between socially oriented perfectionism and the more serious mental health concerns like, eating disorders, depression, suicidal ideation. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's on the rise with all of the social media that's around. But I try to bring it down a little bit and say, okay, are you a people pleaser? Are you constantly performing? Or do you have to keep producing things, that you're having to, meet these quarterly milestones all the time and now you're on that track? Or is it some sort of flavor of perfectionism? But underneath all of it is that perfectionism is just protection. And I don't mean to minimize with the just, but it's a protective function in your life. And it's so important to notice what you tell yourself about that when you get into story, right? And this is why sometimes psychotherapy isn't so helpful. It just reinforces the story when really you need to get beneath the story. You need to get into the body. What are you noticing right now in your life? How we can start to shift it. But the story is where the inner critic lies. Right? It's the story that you're telling yourself, oh, I'm never going to get there. I need to do more. I need to keep learning. Like, that's my problem. I'm like, if I sign up for one more freaking course on something, my husband will probably shoot me. It's like, because
I'm the same way.
But I'm a life learner. So I like that. But at some point you're like, no, you are now an expert. You don't need to keep learning. But that is a protective function that goes back to those roots when I was 10 years old. And I was like, I got to get to college.
Yeah, we had this conversation when I said, oh, I need to do this, get this. I was thinking about getting this certificate. You're like, Jackie, stop.
Like, you do not need a certification. Health coach, entrepreneur, you're already a subject matter expert.
But it's that never feeling enough, right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
the social media is a good point because, I'm even noticing with the industry, physicians, like the pressure, and I've talked to a few, the pressure to feel like they have to produce these posts, day in and day out. And I'm like wondering, when do they have time to see patients? And, I talked to one, they're like, yeah, it's like burnout, but we feel like we have to do it. And these are young women at the early stage of their career feeling the pressure to do all this stuff on social media. Can you have
I feel it.
Yeah, no, I do too, but I have to turn it off because I just...
You do have to turn it off. And I think we have to put the blinders on at times and just focus on what's really important. So I actually have to remind myself when I wake up in the morning, I just say to myself, people first. That's my priority, is how am I going to help my client or people that I am meeting with today? And all the other stuff can actually wait. It's not urgent. But culture and society puts that pressure on that it has to be done now, it has to be done in a certain way, and then we have this urgency. And I know that I've had the flavors of IBS, and what I didn't realize is, talking to a nutritionist, and she's like, no, you don't have a food allergy. That's a nervous system response. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you can't have, a food allergy and have whatever, was happening in my body. She's like, that's your nervous system. It's flushing out. And I was like, oh, yes, I get it. I'm rushing to work. I'm worried about the meetings that I'm going to have. And my body just says, nope. And then you have to take the step back. And that's why when I wrote The Perfectionist Dilemma, I was really just compiling what I was doing in my workshops at Harvard and also through the Insight Timer app. I've been on that for a long time, and I have a similarly named, Overcoming Perfectionism, the audio series there. And then people write you, and then they're telling you about what they're going on and how this is helpful. And here's the thing that perfectionists hate: when you tell them that they actually have to slow down. Right? It's such a paradox that they actually have to retrain their nervous system to, and it really is that basic. And it's small repetition every day of some tool or series of tools that is actually going to regulate your nervous system. And I think the notion of regulating the nervous system is really important, because we could get so calm that we flatline. That's when we have this sort of, I don't know if anyone's talked in the past about polyvagal theory and sort of the connection with the polyvagal nerve. But when we're really stressed, our sympathetic nervous system, that fight-flight response, maxes out. It's like the battery dies and you just drop into sort of this, what I call it, flat line. I thought during COVID, so many people were just in like a flatline state of their nervous system. It was exhaustion. It was like complete, burnout, or even like despair because you weren't having social interaction anymore, and your body was having this big response to actually not being connected to, our nervous systems. We co-regulate each other. So when you realize, where is your nervous system, if you can identify I am in really hyper, fight flight, well, you're going to have a certain series of tools that can help with that, which are usually tools that help calm you down, right? You need to find a way to, if people are going to poo-poo meditation, it's like, okay, you need to find something that's going to regulate your breathing. What is that for you? So for someone, it might be going to the gym and just getting on the rowing machine, for example. For another person, it might be listening to a really good playlist as they're walking outside. That's going to down-regulate the nervous system. But for some people, their nervous system is already just so flatlined that actually what they need to do is get energy. Right? And so the tools that we get that are sometimes recommended aren't so helpful, because it's like, well, where is your nervous system? Is it an overdrive or is it an underdrive? And so I think that sometimes we just have to be aware of, we need a repertoire of tools to help regulate the nervous system. And when you can identify and name for yourself what's happening in your body, that becomes easier to do.
There may not be studies that showed perfectionism and digestive health, but you can kind of correlate, because there is a gut-brain axis, that stress, if the stress is from perfectionism per se, that there could be a connection between this perfectionism mindset and the symptoms that are showing up in your body, like you've outlined. How does the stress show up in your body? And it could be gut, it could be sleep, energy.
There is research that shows that people with perfectionistic tendencies have eating disorder issues. So you might not necessarily put a certain digestive illness in an eating disorder category, right, but it is actually kind of all related one way or another.
Well, yes, we do. And sometimes, there are digestive health patients that are so worried and stressed out about if the food is going to trigger some kind of symptoms, that they become avoidant restrictive eaters, which could lead potentially to a disordered eating patterns. So there is science on that, as you know, and this is something that gastroenterologists, GI psychologists, and others are very concerned about, especially patients that are told not to eat certain things, eliminate things, and then they get so consumed avoiding those that it turns into something that's not healthy for them.
Right.
So I think you have this amazing tool in your book called the Evolve Method. And I think that's where you were going. And I think, we could talk hours about this, and I know you have clients to see. So I thought we'd give our listeners some tools.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think of one tool that might be helpful that I could actually describe so that your listeners could kind of understand it. So the method that I refer to in the book, it has the acronym EVOLVE. And it's sort of like one letter kind of builds on the other, although you could start anywhere. And the first letter E is embody the present moment. And this is what we were talking about. It was just kind of really being present to your own body, being very sort of kind and mindful. The second letter is V, which is validate your experience, right? Because so many people, they're either not connected to their feelings, or people haven't reflected back to them what they're experiencing, or they get, criticized or diminished. Like both, we were told like, oh, it's just stress, wait, what? No, we need to get, find the right kind of people, and we need to do that for ourselves. O stands for open your heart. And this is where I really start getting into the practices of self-compassion, which is also actually for perfectionists, a very hard thing to do. I mean, I'll get somebody in my office and they're like, well, I don't do self-compassion. Or they'll just say, well, what is that?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, no, kind of like really understanding of like, how do I be kinder or compassionate to myself? So that's always a very interesting conversation. And I take that, sort of like skirt on the outside, because that can take time for people to soften up to even themselves. The easiest way to think about it is like, well, if you had a friend that's having the same experience as you are, or is in the same level of distress, how would you approach your friend? And then they'll come up with like, well, I would listen and I'd be really kind. And I would say, oh, it's so hard. It's going to get better. I'm like, okay, could you practice saying those same words to yourself? They're like, no, I can't do that. I'm like, well, let's just give it a try. And then L stands for love your inner critic. And so here's where I really try to flip the script, because most people will say, if they identify like, well, I had this thought pattern and I'm so harsh on myself. And then I'll say, well, how do you feel towards that, or that part? And they're like, I hate it. I just hate it. I wish it would stop. And then the invitation really is, well, if you could imagine that part of yourself that has those thoughts is perhaps a younger version of yourself, like Jackie, perhaps the teenager that was sitting in the basement, with her nose in the books, how could you turn towards that element, that part of yourself with a little more kindness? And so that really what you're trying to do is connect with that part rather than pushing it away. Because it's been there for a long time and it's using the same patterns, but they might not be so helpful right now. It'd be one thing when you were 16, it's another when you're 36 or 56, right? So truly turning towards your inner critic and befriending that part of yourself or the parts of yourself. And then there's vow, make a vow. Is like, can you commit to yourself to doing one kind thing for yourself every day, or one thing that is beneficial to you, and to do it consistently? Because that's the power of the brain, like neuroplasticity in the brain is the more you repeat something, the more you're going to get sort of the entrainment, the neural networks to be familiar with that. And what happens is that people stop too soon. They stop too soon, of doing the healthy habit. And it really is about sort of this doing the reps over and over. And then the last piece is spark the energy of excellence. So that E is the energy of excellence, because it is perfectly noble and okay to want to have high standard of living, have these great achievements and dreams, that you strive for excellence. Good for you. We're not trying to take that away, but can you do it with more ease and joy rather than sort of compulsion or striving that's really contributing to the stress? So the book's kind of chock full of exercises that kind of fall in this sort of evolve method. And, I'm thinking, one, fun exercise. Are you up for one?
I'm up for one.
Okay.
Always. What do I have to do? I don't have to dance.
I'll show you too. So if you can imagine, so if the listeners can imagine putting like one hand on their forehead. So just do it with me, Jackie. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other hand sort of right behind the eyes on the back of the skull, right? So you're giving yourself this brain hug, which is what I call it.
Oh, cool.
It's also called in Eden Energy Medicine, the neurovascular hold, because we carry so many sort of neurovascular points on our head. And now take some deep breaths. Relax your shoulders.
Went into the deep breath.
Yeah. Relax your shoulders just a bit.
My jacket's just poofing up. That's why.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, as long as you know that you're dropping your shoulders and you're just really keep your eyes open or closed, but you're just really breathing in deep down into your belly. And you might notice, this is not a tight squeeze on the head. It's just really a gentle hold, like you're putting a warm compress or maybe a cool compress if you had a fever, however you want to look at it. So I, believe it or not, I sit in my office with students or clients in this position until they're like, oh yeah, I'm feeling it. Right? So that's one simple thing. You can do this lying in the bed or even while you're watching TV, lean back, just it's a gentle way to actually calm, because we're so much in our brains, right? Yes. And we actually need to actually be kinder.
And it's energy, like we're energy.
It is energy.
So it's like voltages, right?
Yes. Well, we have a biofield.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And if it's really tense, right? So how you just did that. You just like, oh my God, you put your hand on your head.
Yeah.
Our bodies actually naturally try to calm themselves. So sometimes we say, oh, that's like the oh my God, oh my God, like you're already putting your hand on your forehead, right? Or you're putting your hand on your heart. These are natural ways that we don't even realize that we're actually trying to calm our bodies, down by sort of natural gestures.
I do this a lot.
I do too. And I noticed myself doing it last night because I don't know, I had a bout of insomnia that happens from time to time. But when I woke up, my two fingers were in the middle, the third eye.
Yeah.
Which is another nice hold. And it's actually one of the points, if you've ever done emotional freedom technique, also called tapping.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So tapping, when you think about the points, these are actually calming the nervous system. It's helping move energy, right? So this is, again, all about regulation. But the fun one has a fun name, actually. It's called the energetic hookup.
Tara, yes. This is like a really a G
Isn't this episode? Like racy? Yes. And so there's a number of ways to do the hookups, but the simplest way, and I feel like this is a gut brain thing, so I think it might be fun for your listeners, is that, just take, your two fingers and you put it sort of in your belly button. There's a hook in there, right? Just in your belly button. And the other two fingers right where you said, right between the eyes.
Does it matter what hand?
No, it doesn't. And so you're kind of like, now you're hooking up, like this is like, imagine putting the plus and minus on the car battery. And now take a deep breath in and pull up. A little tug in the belly, hold it and release. Do it again, one more time. Breath in and you're just pulling slightly up. So what this does is actually helping that central line in your body of energy. If you think almost kind of like an obelisk or a circle, of just going up and down from the spine.
I like this one. I like the hookups.
Yeah. And so we need to kind of like hook up every day.
Yeah, no kidding.
Maybe a few times a day. Yeah. Just hook up those energies because, we're disconnected. People with perfectionism, I see that they're talking heads. So they're just like moving their head from one place to another and their body's trailing along, right?
Right.
But the hookup is like a nice thing to like, oh, I got to hook my body up, my head to my heart to my belly. So I feel like that's a fun one for digestive health.
It's always so fascinating. I mean, the power of the gut-brain interaction and stress and everything. I mean, it's just so fascinating. And over the last 10 years, there's been so much amazing research that has just come out and it's made us so much more aware. I mean, when I started in digestive health, it wasn't a lot. Nobody was really talking about it. And now it's everywhere. And the gut-brain interaction is just so huge. And I'm so glad that people are recognizing the significance of that connection in overall health and well-being.
Well, I think, don't they say, what the researchers or the scientists about sort of, the gut as the second brain is that we're actually getting more information from our body to our brain, 80% through the nervous system versus from the brain to the body, which is like 20%. So the body in our brain is getting all of this information all the time in the service of homeostasis, in the service of regulating the body. So we need to pay attention to our body. We don't need to hyperfixate on it. I mean, so that could get a little bit dicey sometimes, but you need to kind of find that balance.
No, but this has been great. We're definitely going to have to get you on the show again. We've had you on a couple of years ago. We talked about your other book, Kindness, which is just an amazing book. And if you haven't checked it out, we'll direct you to Dr. Tara Cousineau's website where you can check out The Perfectionist Dilemma. I can't wait to finish reading this. It's really eye-opening for me, and I couldn't wait to have you on the show, but there's so much more to talk about. Listeners, if this conversation resonates with you, I truly encourage you to check out Dr. Tara's book, her website. She's got some great educational materials and a support community around this topic, and kindness and compassion I am a strong believer in everything that you talk about as it relates to digestive health. And I hope that our listeners got some joy from listening and some peace knowing that, they're not alone, and this is something that can be worked on, addressed in small steps for hopefully big changes. And this week, as Dr. Tara would probably say, give yourself permission to be imperfect. And maybe that means asking for help, taking a break, or simply being kind for yourself when things don't go as planned. Lord knows I need to do that myself because a lot of things don't go as planned. Dr. Tara, my friend, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. Your work is such a gift to everyone who it touches. And I hope that we can do our part in spreading the word about your amazing work because I really feel it can be transformative. Thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure, Jackie, and you're doing amazing work, and we just have to keep on doing it, right?
Yes.
So
thank you.
Yeah.
So,
thanks.
and we thought it would be fun. We'd love to hear from you. We're both on social media, Gastro Girls on social media, Dr. Tara. It would be fun to hear from you. Tell us how perfectionism has impacted your health, and if you're seeing the relationship possibly between maybe if you have digestive health issues or symptoms, chronic. Share your thoughts with us on social media at Gastro Girl on Instagram, and where else are we? X. Tara, where can listeners find you?
Oh, right. Instagram, LinkedIn, my website, tarakuzno.com, the book's website, theperfectionistdilemma.com. I have free Happy Achiever tools on there. I show some of these energy skills there. So just look at my name. It probably pop up somewhere.
Yeah, we'll try. We have this Ask Gastro Girl app. Check it out. You can get it on our website. It's free to download. Try it out. It's AI powered, so questions that you may have, common questions. We don't diagnose or treat, but it's really helpful in having some insight on what's going on and maybe prepare you for your next doctor visit. Thank you again, Dr. Tara. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and Dr. Tara's. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.